One of my fondest memories was going with my siblings, well, mainly my two sisters, Diana and Olga, would be going to the beach. Santa Monica Pier was the best, and reason why that was one, we used to meet our friends there, or what we used to call back then boyfriend. That was one of the areas, Santa Monica Pier. There was games, food, you'd walk around the pier, you could get in the water. It was something that I really enjoyed. It was something we looked forward to. You didn't spend a whole lot of money. It was a few dollars. You could get a drink, you could get some fries, but also if it was hot, you'd be able to get into the beach, ride some of the games that were around there or play some games there. And of course, the best one is always taking pictures with my siblings. My mom shares with us briefly how difficult it was for any family out in Mexico, especially what one calls the countryside, that there is really no jobs. Either the father would work in the fields, mother would always stay home, and I think that was some of the most difficult times that my mother shares with us about it being difficult, especially having 5 children, to be able to get the main necessities. My mother says, you know, you would not go without beans and rice and tortillas. That's something very, very simple. But when it came to meats and other things, it was much more difficult. And my mom really doesn't go very deep into detail. I don't know if it's because the pain or the memories that she doesn't want to bring back. That's all that she briefly tells us about it. And in regards to one of my greatest memories out in Mexico has been to share with my grandfather. My grandfather was one of my inspirations. I always say the love that I felt that I've never felt in my life. I enjoyed being with him. I was very spoiled with him. He would take me a lot with him, even though there were times where he couldn't, where there was business trips. And of course, I was just a little brat and I wanted to go everywhere with him. So he would make it possible for me to go with him, and it was just mainly being with him. Of course, he used to buy me my candy. I still remember very clearly the smell of the flowers that he used to buy me when I was little. It used to come in a little container, and I'm not sure the name of it. I'm still always trying to think of like, what flower was it? What flower was it? And it used to come like in a little box, and it was this smell that it's very distinctive to other smells. But it was something that I remember clearly about my grandfather. I remember riding the bus with him to his business trip and stopping by, and of course, you know, I want candy, I want a soda. So soda I think has been in candy with me since I was very young. So part of my grandfather being with him, riding the horse with him, spending time with him, having lunch with him was probably one of the best memories I've ever had. One of the biggest culture shocks that I had when we immigrated to America is personally for me, myself, because I did come years later after my parents and my siblings, was the food. It tasted very different. So a lot of the times people are like, well, what's really the difference? I mean, there's a lot of Mexican food here. There's a lot of different things. It didn't taste the same to me. I think that was one of them. That was a big shock to me. Though my mom cooked many of the traditional foods, I still felt that it was not the same as it was back in Mexico. I believe that many people who come, especially myself, I was young, and there was things that you do begin to see. One was, in Mexico, I lived with my great-grandfather, and I was the only child. And when I came to the US and I had my siblings, it was like, oh my gosh, I gotta share a room. There's clothes I gotta share. This is like, no, this is not what I want. But I did realize that there was a difference back home in Mexico. It was a small town, a little country town where I lived with my great-grandfather. So it was very different when it comes to vehicles, it comes to grocery stores, things like that. There was one grocery store in Mexico. When you come to the US, there's grocery stores, there's fast foods, there's gas stations. So all that was just kind of a shock to me. And when it comes to food, I hate to see people waste food. And I always tell my kids, do you realize in other countries, you know, what people would do for this? And that goes for all of us. My parents, my mother, I recall very clearly, would always, you serve and you eat everything on your plate. So there's a lot of things that I think I still take with me, and I do share with my kids, and I go back to it and I realize like, oh my gosh, I do take a lot of wonderful things, but I adapted to America.